Hey everyone, it's Brandy and welcome back to my channel, Brandy Jenny's Bookshelf. So this is going up a little later than I wanted it to, but it's still pretty early in the month, so it's not too bad. But as you can tell from the title of this video, this is going to be my wrap up for the second half of June. And then at the end, I'm going to go over the books that I read for the Simsathon. I think I mentioned in my TBR that I had planned on participating in a few different readathons throughout June. So normally I prep for this. If you guys have seen my past few videos, I normally have like a printout of the books in the order that I'm going to talk about them with the descriptions, and then I go into my thoughts and all of that. But for some reason at work, I remembered that I needed to prep for 2 videos. I did my prep for those and I completely forgot to prep for this one. Luckily though, this month I was really on top of writing down all of my thoughts once I had finished them in my my bookish bullet journal thing that I think I told you guys about a little bit. So I have things to go off of, and hopefully that's enough and I remember descriptions and everything like that. But if I don't, I apologize, but I didn't want to wait another day to film this because I do want to get this up. So as far as stats for the overall month of June, I read a total of 23 books, and over those 23 books, I read 6,750 pages, and my average rating for the month was 3.79 stars. Also, I did a few other stats because I had like extra space at the end of my little thing that I did for all the books that I had read. But for the entire month, I had a total of 3 rereads. I borrowed 8 books from the library, and I think I purchased 19. Just in case you guys are curious, here is my the end of my pages read thingy in my book page in my bullet journal thing that I have. I did mess up a little here. Usually I wait until the day after to fill out stuff, but I was just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna read, but then I went to sleep, and by the time I woke up I didn't feel like reading. So yeah, I messed up a little. Not gonna do that again, but actually I did that this month, but I just colored over it. But anyway, and here is this page, which I marked down my books read based on the days. I marked down books I read, audiobooks read, day I finished book, and days I've purchased. And then as you can see here, I write down each book that I read color coded so I can use that for the pages read. And then it did go onto the back page as well. It didn't end up reading all of the books that I put onto that back page, but I think I have read almost all of the ones that I didn't actually get to before the end of June. So like I mentioned, I'm going to be going over the books that I read during the second half of the month, and I have 9 of those to talk about with you guys. My least rated for this part of my wrap up was only a 3-star. And the first one that I have to talk about is My Hero Academia Volume 1 by Kohei Horikoshi. Excuse me for not having character names down in this one, just because, like I said, forgot to do my prep sheet. Anyway, this one is following this guy. He is living in this world where I think it's like a futuristic, it's like modern day, but in the future. And by this point, there has been this gene that has been discovered, and now there are a bunch of people with superpowers, and these people that have these powers have the ability to go off to the school where they train to become superheroes. We're following this guy who really wants to go and get into the school to become a superhero. He comes from a family, I believe both of his parents have some superpower, but at his age nothing has manifested, and it's learned that if you're gonna have a power, it manifests pretty early on, and he's like a really rare case of parents that have some sort of powers and he doesn't have any. And he ends up meeting up with this superhero, and he offers him the opportunity to help him become a superhero. I don't want to give too much of it away, just because if you guys haven't heard of or haven't read this one, I feel like it might be a good one to kind of go into without knowing too much, just so you can kind of figure things out as they go along. I feel like this story was really different from any other manga that I have read before. It was one of those books where I was just like, I enjoyed it, but there was something about it that I also didn't enjoy, which is kind of why I gave it 3 stars. The basics of the story was really interesting, and I wanted to learn more. But also, I don't know, I think it was partly the art style, but I think mainly because it was kind of jumpy. Like, I could see why it was done this way. It's like more action scenes happening right after one another, and I feel like that kind of hurt the continuous flow of the story, which sucks. But it wasn't so bad where I wasn't interested in continuing. Overall, I enjoyed the story. It wasn't my favorite. The art style was definitely a lot different, and the story was kind of choppy. Alright, so moving on to the next book, I have Meet Cute by Helena Hunting. I gave this book 3.5 stars. So this story is following 2 characters, Kaylin and Daxton. It is a dual perspective contemporary romance novel. The 2 of them actually meet on their first day of law school. She's like on her way to class listening to this motivational podcast thing, and he's like on the quad playing with friends or something. I don't remember. I think they were like tossing football or something. I don't know. They end up running into each other, and they have this friendship through law school. And then we skip forward, and we see that Caitlin is now a lawyer dealing with trust. And Daxton ends up coming into her office because his parents actually are setting up a trust, or making an adjustment for a trust for his younger sister. This is the first time that they've met since law school, and she is not really the biggest fan of him. She used to be a really big fan of him when she was younger and when they first met, because he was like a childhood / teenage actor. And, you know, she was a really big fan of him and his work. But after law school and whatever happened, she's just like, yeah, I am physically attracted to him, but I don't like him at all. It's some more details about that I'm not really going to get into, because that's part of the story that you can learn on your own. But then unexpectedly, Dax ends up becoming responsible for his 13-year-old sister. He ends up becoming her legal guardian. And he has to work with Caitlin because he's actually being sued by his aunt for custody of his little sister. And there's a lot going on with that. And because Caitlin is part of the trust, she's trying to make sure that everything is being done to the best of the ability for the younger sister, because she is in charge of her account. So the 2 of them end up being forced together, and because of that forced proximity, they end up reconnecting and then talking out some things that happen, and things end up progressing further than they ever have before. I think that the overall story was okay, that it just wasn't anything that was super exciting. I think the romance was done well, and the smutty parts I think were my favorite parts of the entire book. Typically I enjoy watching the characters come together and seeing all of their relationship or all of their romance, and I did enjoy seeing that, but it wasn't like the forefront of the story for me. A lot of the story was dealing with the other issues that the characters were going through, and I felt like their relationship was kind of on the back burner. I mean, it was happening, but you know, it wasn't the major point of the book. So while I enjoyed it, it wasn't my favorite. So I do plan on reading more of her books, but this one was just kind of middle of the road for me. So now we're moving up to my 4-star reads, and the first one that I'm going to talk about is Memento by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is the novella that was part of the pre-order for Aurora Rising. As always with the series, I wish there was more. So this one is actually a prequel novella, and it is, as expected from a prequel, taking place mostly before the first book, Illuminate, and it kind of gets a little bit into parts of Illuminate, but we don't have too much character overlap. We get to see a few of the characters that we know from that first book, but not much interaction with them. This is pretty much following the process of how Aiden kind of turned from the artificial intelligence, like just, you know, what it started as and what it like grew to become in Illuminate, as we saw started to happen in Illuminate up until the end of the series in Obsidio. Like I said, it's focusing on Aiden, but we're following this through the perspective of another character. Her name is Olivia Klein. So Olivia Klein is, I believe she is some type of scientist, and she actually has a new job aboard the Alexander, and she is working with a crew on Aiden to run logistics and make sure everything is running okay, and, you know, do things as needed. And as with the other books, we get a little bit of personal relationships through this character that we're following, but we also get to see her interact with Aiden about humanity and what it means to be human, and making different decisions based on certain things, and how Aiden like is trying to process that, but at first Aiden is not able to. But then after the damage, it's like things suddenly shift, even though it kind of starts to shift a little beforehand, because you kind of get to start to see a little bit of Aiden's creepy side. But once that damage happens, then it's just like things really kind of go bonkers. If you have already read this, like when Aiden sent that email with the picture of the like train scenario, and I was just like, this is really good. It was crazy, as can be expected when it comes to Aiden once things start to really get going. I hope one day they might decide to revisit the Illuminate world, because this little 82 pages was just amazing. It wasn't like the best thing ever, but I still loved it, and I would read anything that they write in this world because I love it. And yeah, I don't think I have anything more to say. The next book that I picked up is Dragon Pearl by Yoon-Ha Lee. This is actually a middle grade novel. This book is following 13-year-old Min. At the beginning of the story, she is at home with her mom and her aunts and her, I think her 2 cousins or something like that. And this officer comes to her home and pretty much says that her brother deserted the Space Forces to possibly go find the Dragon Pearl, and they were trying to figure out that the officer was trying to figure out if they knew anything. Min doesn't believe that her brother would ever desert from the Space Forces, because she's just like, that's what he's wanted to do his whole life, and I can't see any reason why he would do that. So instead of just taking everything at face value, she decides to set off on her own to go figure out what happened to her brother. I'm sure everyone has already heard of this, but this is, as you could probably see from the top of that, but this is part of the Rick Riordan Presents imprint, which basically means that this is based off of mythology. This one is following Korean mythology, and in this story, Min, along with the rest of her family, are what are known as gumiho, which are fox spirits. Being a gumiho and having fox magic, basically she can use her magic to change the appearance of either herself or things around her, so that kind of helps her out on her mission to go and find out what's going on with her brother. I actually really ended up enjoying this one as well. I kept forgetting that this was middle grade. I felt like this was written really well. It was easy to understand, but it wasn't like too simple. This definitely went a way that I was not expecting at all. It was a lot darker at times. Really, the entire book was a lot darker than I ever expected for a middle grade, because of some of the things that this character has to deal with in situations that she gets in, and even the way things turn out in the end. Wasn't expecting any of that to happen. I don't know too much about Yoon-Ha Lee's adult work or any of his other works, because I have seen mixed things about that, but if he does write more middle grade novels, especially in this world, I will definitely check them out. The next book that I have to talk about is There's Something About Sweetie by Sandhya Menon. This is a companion to When Dimple Met Rishi, which I haven't read yet. This is actually the first book that I've read from this author. This is a dual perspective YA contemporary following Sweetie and Ashish. Sweetie, as you could probably tell from the cover of this book, is fat, and she doesn't have a problem with that at all. She feels good about her body and the way she looks. She has a good group of friends. She's actually on the track team, and she's the best, I believe, on her track team. So she's pretty happy with her life. However, she does have to deal with her mom, who is constantly talking about how she needs to lose weight, you know, and how people are going to make fun of her because of her weight. And she is struggling with staying confident with herself and trying to let her mom know that she's okay with the way she looks, and like she has no problems with that. On the other hand, we have Ashish, who is actually, I believe he is Rishi's younger brother. He's pretty much known as, like, I don't want to say he's known as a playboy, but he has dated a lot. And he was in love, I believe, with his last girlfriend, but she broke up with him after cheating on him when she went away to college. And he is just not happy at the moment at all. So one thing leads to another, and he ends up suggesting to his mom, like, hey, you know what? You set my brother up, so why don't you go ahead and set me up as well? And so she does that, and she sets Sweetie and Ashish up. But Sweetie's mom isn't really happy with it. She says that he is way out of her league. She basically said that Sweetie isn't good enough to date him because of her weight. And Sweetie wants to prove her mom wrong, so she actually ends up contacting him outside of that, and they end up hanging out together, even though, you know, her parents didn't agree on it. I don't know what I was expecting from this, but this was absolutely adorable. And I love this so much. Definitely, I need to go get When Dimple Met Rishi. I need a hardcover, so they will obviously be matching. But I love this. It was adorable. Gave it 4 stars. The last 4-star book that I have to talk about is Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. I ended up picking this one up after seeing a lot of people raving about this one. This is another dual perspective adult romance that is following Georgie and Travis. Travis is a baseball player, or he was a baseball player at the beginning of the story. He has come off of a really bad injury, and he has gone back to his hometown, and things are just not really going too well from him. He is pretty much drunk all the time in his apartment, like takeout containers, just like he just not having the best time. And Georgie is actually his childhood friend's little sister, and I don't know exactly what gets it started, but she is worried about him. I don't know if anyone asked her to do it, but she decides to go over to his apartment and pretty much do whatever she can to get him to get out the bed, get out of his apartment, and go do something that has purpose until he finds whatever it is that he really wants to do. Things start off because she invites her family up to her new house for brunch, and she ends up inviting Travis as well because he's there when she asks her brother, and Travis ends up being the only one to show up, and he stays there, and they get to talking about different parts of her house, and they end up continuously thrown into situations together, and the two of them really start to confide in each other because he finds it really easy to talk to her, and as they're going through this process, he starts to realize that she's not little Georgie anymore. You know, she has grown up, and he's actually attracted to her. So we kind of follow them through their little journey of their romance beginning. I think overall this book was really well done. I think I probably would have given it a 5 stars if it wasn't for a few things. Obviously, the misunderstandings in this were really annoying. The fact that they didn't want to talk anything out, that kind of really brought it down for me, because throughout the majority of the book they were talking to each other, and the two were pretty open with each other, but when that situation came up, it's just like she just automatically took the word. I mean, I get that it was her older brother, but at the same time, she didn't give Travis the chance to explain exactly what was going on, and like even her brother didn't give Travis a chance. He just kind of took it at face value, even though he knew that the situation that was between him and his father when he said what he said was just not the best at all. I think another part of it was that during the sexual scenes he kept saying baby girl, and I was kind of grossed out a little bit because I know this is probably going to sound weird because I usually don't have a problem with pet names. However, I read this right after I read With the Fire on High, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But in that book, we're dealing with a mother who calls her 3-year-old daughter baby girl. So every time he called her baby girl, I was just like no, because I kept thinking about the baby, and then I'm like, why are you calling this grown woman that? I was just like, it kept pulling me out of the story because yeah, the two of those together, I just, bad choice to read this right after. Normally, like I said, I don't mind about things like that, and if I hadn't just read that, it definitely wouldn't have been a problem, but literally finishing this right after that, I was just like, that's a no-go for me for that pet name right now. But the book was really sexy when it had those moments. I thought, like I said, everything else was really well done, and I'm definitely going to be checking out more from Tessa Bailey. This was really good. I highly recommend this one of my favorite romances that I've read so far this year. The next one that I have to talk about is NickSIA Unleashed by Scott Rankin, and this is one that I gave 4.5 stars to. This is the sequel to NickSIA, and if you haven't read NickSIA, probably don't listen to this because I will be spoiling parts of NickSIA. I guess you could just mute me or skip forward until I'm done or until I put this down. But NickSIA Unleashed is following Emmett Atwater along with the rest of the group who actually make it to Eden. At the end of the first book, there was kind of like a fight between Emmett and Rosie to see who gets to go into the pod to make it down to Eden. But yeah, like I said, he makes it down to Eden and he ends up grouping up with the people that he's going to be working with while they're on this planet. We're pretty much following them as they get started on their mission, and they realize that Babel isn't exactly as they thought they were, and trying to figure out how they're going to get back home when they know that Babel isn't going to stick to the promises or the contract that they had them sign. And then on the other hand, they're also trying to learn more about these Adamites and figure out what's going on with them, because everything is not as it seems with them. There's a lot of different things going on with this. I'm not really going to get into this one too much because it is a sequel and I don't want to spoil anything too much. Just know that this was amazing. I promise this was a wild ride for the majority of the book. There were a few low moments, which honestly I feel like are needed when you come into a high action packed book like this. I feel like things were definitely a little bit more high stakes in this one as compared to the first one. There were like some high stakes moments in the first book, but this one kind of stepped it up a notch, and I enjoyed it so much, and I really can't wait to get to the final book in this trilogy, which I will be reading at some point this month. But I gave this one 4.5 stars. The second to last book that I have to wrap up for June is The Wicked King by Holly Black. Honestly, I'm not really going to get too much into this one either because this is another sequel. This book, we're following Jude as she tries to fight to keep the power that she gained at the end of the first book. I'm just gonna leave it there and just know that this book kind of broke me a little bit. There are so many moments that I wasn't expecting that I just loved. Like I said, Jude is fighting to keep these powers, and she ends up in a lot of situations being betrayed by people, and let me just say this, I hate Taryn. At the end of the first book, I was just like, I don't like her. And with the little novella, I was like, I still don't like her, but I'm like, she's a really interesting character. And I was just hoping she wouldn't do anything too stupid in this book. And she did. I swear, I hate her so much. I just want her to choke and die. And then the whole Jude and Cardin situation, I don't even know, like, things happened and I was just like, okay, they're going a certain way. And then I heard a lot of people talking about that point at the end of the book, and I was just like, I know something crazy is gonna happen, and I was lulled into a sense of false security. I don't know why I forgot about the title of this book, but oh Lord, I'm hoping that she put, like Holly Black puts my heart back together in Queen of Nothing. I'm scared. If we continue going based off of these titles, things aren't going to be happy for anyone. But maybe, just maybe, things are gonna, I don't know, come together at some point. Oh Lord, I'm not ready, but I need it because I need to know what happened. I can honestly say that I enjoyed this book way better than the first one. Like I said, gave this one 4.5 stars. Wasn't perfect, but it was up there. And the final book that I have to wrap up is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. This book is following 17-year-old Imani. I believe she's 17. She is in her senior year of high school, and she's actually a teen mom. Her freshman year of high school, she got pregnant, and now she has a 3-year-old daughter. And she is struggling with how to pursue her career or pursue her dreams of becoming a chef, and whether or not it will be worth it, or if she needs to find something to do to pretty much better the life of her daughter. So this one was a little bit different from her first book. I felt like it still had some of those same themes as the first book. We're dealing obviously with the high school student and dealing with the pressures of her surroundings and her peers. However, this one, we're dealing with the added bonus of her having a daughter and everything that she has had to go through because of that. Throughout the story, we get to see a lot of different things come up where she is dealing with the struggles of being a mom, but also being a high school student and having to juggle those things. I absolutely love this book. Gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. Elizabeth Acevedo is definitely a new favorite author for me. I could tell that from reading The Poet X, but this has definitely solidified that, and I can't wait to see what else she puts out in the future. I do have a full written review for this, so I'm not gonna really talk too much more about this. Just know that I loved it. I highly recommend this one, and I think you guys should go pick this up if you haven't already, or if you haven't planned to and the premise sounds interesting. I would suggest you guys go pick it up. So those are all the books that I read during the second half of the month. I had a pretty good reading month overall, and especially for the last half of it, I feel like most of my reads I really enjoyed. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I am going to get into the books that I read and what challenges they fit for the Simsathon readathon that happened throughout the entire month of June. So I think I showed it off, but there was like an entire like little list of different challenges and stuff that you can follow. Some of them you had to follow in a specific order. Pretty much the start here section, you can either like create a sim or choose a household, and then you go through challenges of like buying or building a house, doing renovations, and all of those things. And then there was a live mode or live mode, however you say that, and all of those had different challenges to go throughout that as well. Hopefully that makes sense. I decided to put this in my journal. I actually put all of the challenges for everything in here. I'm just going to go through each of the challenges that I completed and what books I read for them. So starting with the start here section, like I mentioned, there were a few challenges where you had to pick one or the other. So the first challenge, you could either choose create a sim or choose a household. They were both worth 5 points, so I decided to go with create a sim, and for that challenge it was to read a book that was the first in a series. And for that one I went with Written and Read by Anne Bishop. I decided to restart the series, so I figured this was the perfect book to fit into that challenge. And next, you could have bought a house or built a house. I decided to go with buy a house for 3 points. Both of these were worth 3 points as well. And this one was to read a contemporary or book set in our world. And for this one, I went with 30 Day Boyfriend by Whitney G. This was one of the books I read during the first half of the month, if you haven't already seen that wrap up. Next, I went with Perfect the Layout. This is still talking about the house, and that one was worth 2 points. And for that one, you were supposed to read a book with an interesting format. And for that one, I decided to go with Memento by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. Next one that I went with was interior design, which was also worth 2 points. And this one was to read a book with a pretty cover. And for that one, I decided to go with Sailor Moon Volume 1. Yep, figured that one would work for that. The final prompt that I read for the Start Here section, which is the like creating a sim and then household stuff, was landscaping, which this one was also worth 2 points, and that was to read a book featuring nature in the cover, title, or theme. And for this one, I went with The Wicked King by Holly Black. Moving on to live mode or live mode, however you say it. I think I say both, depending on how I'm feeling. First challenge that I completed was to get a job, and then there was a separate career options section, but the one I decided to go with was writer, which was worth 2 points, and that was to read a book by a new to you author. And for this one, I read Faking It by Kay Bromberg. The next one was to fall in love, which was worth 3 points, and for this one, you're supposed to read a book with a romance element. This one was a bit unconventional, but I decided to go with Undying by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. Next was to make a friend, and that one was worth 3 points, and it says to read a book that features friendships. And for this one, I went with Loving Mr. Daniels by Brittany C. Cherry. Next was to get a promotion, which was worth 3 stars as well, and this one was to read a book you think will be 5 stars. For this one, I went with NickSIA Unleashed by Scott Rankin. I didn't end up giving this 5 stars, but I did think when I started off that I was going to give it 5 stars. The next one was to get married, which was worth 5 points, and for this one, we were supposed to read a book with an established couple. And for this one, I went with Intercepted by Alexa Martin. Next was to have a baby, which was worth 5 points, and that is to read a book that features a child. And for this one, I decided to go with Dragon Pearl by Yoon Han Lee. Next, we have Pay Your Bills, which is to read your most recent purchase. And at the time, I went with Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. The next challenge I completed was Eat a Cookie, which was worth 1 point as well, and this was to read a book under 200 pages. And for this one, I read Spell of Desire Volume 3 by Tomu Omi. The next challenge I completed was Reach the Top of Your Career track, which was worth 5 points. And for this one, we were supposed to read a finale, and for that one, I went with Spell of Desire Volume 5 by Tomu Omi. Next, I have Woohoo, which was worth 2 points, and for this one, we're supposed to read a smutty book. And for that one, I went with Once Ghosted, Twice Shy by Alyssa Cole. Next was Have an Affair, and this one was worth 5 points. And you're supposed to read a book featuring a breakup. And for this one, I went with Smut by Karina Hale. Next, I completed Gaining Fishing Skill, which was worth 1 point, and that one was to randomize your TBR. And for that one, I went with There's Something About Sweetie by Sandia Manon. Next, I have Burn Down the Kitchen, which was worth 2 points. And for this one, it says read a book with flames on the cover / title. And for that one, I went with the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. Not exactly flames, but I figured fire would count because fire and flames are the same thing. The next challenge I completed was Meet the Grim Reaper, which was worth 3 points. And for this one, you're supposed to read a book featuring death. And I read Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. And the final challenge I completed for the Simsathon was Have Your Birthday / Age Up, which was worth 2 points. And for this one, you're supposed to read an adult book. And for this one, I went with Murder of Crows by Anne Bishop. Those are all the challenges that I completed for the Simsathon. So my total number of points by the end of this was 57. And that's counting up, you know, what each of the challenges was worth. However, I did use the spreadsheet that was provided when the readathon was announced, and with that one, they actually counted an extra point for the amount of books that you read or the amount of challenges that you completed, so a book for each challenge. And because of that, with the spreadsheet, I got an extra 20 points. When the readathon was announced, the host didn't announce that each book also counted for a point, so that's why I put 57. But if we're going by what I got on the spreadsheet, then I got a total of 77 points. But if you guys participated in Simsathon, let me know what your final score was. But if not, let me know if you read any of these books that I talked about in this video, or even in my first part of the wrap up. Let me know some of the books you read in June, and if you think I should pick up anything based off of what I talked about and what I enjoyed, definitely let me know. But that's all I have for you guys in this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to see more from me, make sure you subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys again in the next one. Bye.